Good morning. The time is 10:18, and I would like to call the Marketing, Regulatory, and Legislative Subcommittee meeting for Friday, October 17th to order. We're located at AVA's headquarters at 1999 Harrison, Suite 2300 in Oakland at the Altamont Conference Room. Members of the public wishing to make a comment can do so by either using the raise hand function in Zoom or *9 if you're joining by telephone. Clerk, can you please take the roll?
Director Lopez,
Present.
Director Diallo, Director Barrientos,
Present.
Director Nygaard, Chair Trigger.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Quorum has been established, and we are moving on to item 2, which is public comment. Don't see any members of the public in the room. Are there any members of the public online wishing to make a comment?
There are no members of the public with their hand raised at this time.
Okay. And we're moving on to approval of the minutes from June 21st. Are there any changes to the minutes or any motions? And we're a small committee. I'll just move the minutes.
I'll second.
There's a second. Great. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Director Lopez,
Yes.
Director Diallo, Director Barrientos,
Yes, I, whatever.
Director Nygaard, Chair Trigger.
Aye.
The minutes are approved.
Great, thank you so much. We are now on item 4, the item we've all been waiting for. 2025 ledge session in review. And I'm gonna turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Trigub. And good morning, everyone. I'm Todd Edmister. I'm the head of the policy team here at AVA. Legislative falls within that group's purview. I'm joined by my colleague on the phone, Sam Sadel. He's our legislative lead and traveling on behalf of the agency today. Hence, I'll be presenting rather than Sam, but he is available if we need to drag him into this conversation. I'm joined here in person by my colleagues, Dominic Faria and Kendall Downey, who will be presenting on various elements of the year in review as we go through the slide deck here, which I see is now up. So without further, one process note. So we are presenting to this subcommittee here in October, ahead of presenting to the board in November. So flagging for the members of this subcommittee that if there is feedback that they would like to provide to us between now and the November meeting, they've got about 6 weeks to do it. That's really why we're not presenting to the full board in October. We wanted to maximize the opportunity for the members of the subcommittee to have input ahead of the board presentation. So flagging that for you all. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you. So this is the 2025 California legislative session in review. The session has ended. The time for the governor to sign or veto bills that passed through the legislature has come and gone. So we are now in a position to do a retrospective. As you will see from the deck, we will be walking through some of the individual bills in the course of this morning. And then we will close with a very brief heads up on what we expect to see in the next legislative session. Next slide. All right, so just to quickly set the stage here, this is the timeline for the past legislative session. This should look familiar. We presented a similar slide when we came to the board for positions earlier this year. As you can see, we're now in October and all of the deadlines have come and gone with nothing on the calendar for the next couple of months. Next slide, please. So when we came to in April, as we noted, there were several thousand bills that were pending in the legislature. Several hundred of those were related to energy. We winnowed those down to a subset of bills that we would concentrate on, and from that subset, a further smaller universe of bills on which the agency would ultimately take position. So you can see the count here, 28 bills ultimately were ones that we were keeping a close eye on and or taking an active hand in. 13 of those, we, as an organization, took formal positions, 11 support, 2 support if amended. Of those, 4 made it through the legislature and got across the line. Of those 4, 2 actually were signed by the governor, 2 were vetoed. So you can kind of see the funnel effect here from an enormous universe of bills proposed to a very, very small universe that actually go into law. Flagging for you the sidebar on the right as well. Subsequent to our coming before the board with position recommendations, the governor, in conjunction with the legislature, put forward bills to extend cap and trade. So recall that California has a program for capping emissions and allowing those who have the right to pollute to trade that right amongst themselves, hence cap and trade. And the idea is that the ceiling on allowable pollution comes down over time. And the other concept there is that since the ability to pollute declines, the value of the right to pollute should increase. This yields revenues, the GGRF, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which in turn can be spread as the legislature deems fit. The existing program was supposed to end in 2030. The legislature and the governor have gotten out in front of that and extended the program via these 2 bills to 2045. And as we'll talk about in a bit more detail as we go through the individual bills, they've also made some changes to the process for allocating the revenues from this program. And so that's what's covered in the sidebar. And that's explaining why it wasn't among the 28 that we had flagged, came after that time had passed to come before the board. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I did want to single out for attention some of the activities that we were active in where we obtained some really good results. And so highlighting those 4, and again, we'll talk about these in more detail as we go through the individual bills. We had a battery safety bill where we, AVA, actually got our language incorporated into the bill, which is a significant achievement. So SB 541, long and tortuous tale there. We were very heavily involved in conversations around the shape that bill would take. Talk about it in more detail there, but a very positive experience for the agency. SB 254, this was the affordability package, and we, in conjunction with CalCCA, worked to successfully remove language that would have impacted potentially our procurement autonomy. And then finally, AB 222, and this is a bill relating to data centers, one of several. And again, there we were able to work with the legislature to get language that others were trying to get inserted into the bill kept out of it. So flagging that for your attention and highlighting the successful efforts of the team here in moving the needle on things that really matter to the agency and the legislature. All right, on to the next slide. So with this, we're gonna step into the individual bills, the 28, which we were monitoring and/or taking positions on. And with this, I'm gonna pass the mic to my colleagues. We'll lead off with Dominic here to talk about the affordability. I guess before I do that, I should say we have, consistent with the presentation that we made to the board, we have bucketed the bills into the topic areas that we had highlighted in the legislative program that the board adopted. And so they're not in straight number order. They're organized by category here, aligning with the legislative program. All right, so with that, over to Dominic here to talk about the affordability bills.
Great, thanks, Todd. Appreciate it. And as you mentioned, my name's Dominic. I'm part of the policy team here at AVA. And we're going to start with the affordability bills that we took positions on or tracked throughout the year. Just a note here, I won't be going through, or Kendall and I won't be going through every single bill that's on these slides. So if you have questions about ones that we didn't cover or more questions about the ones that we did highlight, please feel free to ask them at the end. So just a note there. We'll start with AB 729 and AB 1207. Both these bills generally have to do with the California climate credit. AB 729 was the bill that AVA took a support position on earlier this year. This bill ended up not passing the legislature, but concepts of it were adopted into AB 1207, which, as Todd mentioned, was the bill that extended the cap and trade system within California. AB 729 would have changed the months in which the climate credit would be credited to customers on their energy bills. As you know, the climate credit comes from revenues that come from the cap and trade program. Currently, under that program, the climate credit is distributed in April and October of every year. 729 would have moved the climate credit to the 2 months of the year where energy bills are generally the highest. So that's August and September. Ultimately, well, AB 729 did in advance, AB 1207 adopted language that gives the CPUC discretion to sort of choose which months during the year to distribute the climate credit. So we'll find out more when the CPUC makes a decision on when the climate credit will be distributed. But just noting that ultimately a change in when the climate credit is distributed was adopted and signed into law by the governor. I'll move down to SB 254. This was the large affordability package that was passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. Ava did take a support position on this bill. It's a big bill. It does a lot of different things, each of which primarily focused on energy affordability. I'll call out, I think, 3 specific provisions within this law. One, it establishes a transmission infrastructure accelerator program within the state to facilitate public financing of transmission projects. The goal here to save money for ratepayers through lower borrowing costs and also a new 20% tax credit for transmission projects as well. 2, it expedites SEQA review for clean energy infrastructure. Note that it's expediting the review, doesn't change any, create any categorical exclusions or anything like that. The idea is just to get those projects online faster. And then 3rd, it excludes the first $6 billion utilities spend on wildfire mitigation capital expenditures from being included in the equity rate base. And that means utilities can't collect a profit from ratepayers on that chunk of spending. So those are three main things within this law. There's a lot more there. Happy to get into it if you have any more questions. But I also want to note, as Todd mentioned in the earlier slides, and one of the wins that we've had. So originally, each side of the legislature had their own big affordability package. In the assembly, that was AB 825 before it later became the Pathways Bill, which is not confusing at all. So there's AB 825 and SB 254, both affordability packages. Within AB 825, the Assembly's version of the affordability package, there was a provision language that would have established a statewide demand-side management program review task force, which would at the CEC, which would have the power to shutter different energy efficiency or demand response programs that it deemed not cost effective. So this would have directly sort of threatened CCA autonomy to create these programs and run them ourselves. So we worked with Cal CCA and the author's office, that was Cotty Petrie Norris in the assembly, to remove this language from AB 825, and it wasn't included when that bill was ultimately, language from that bill was ultimately rolled up into SB 254. So just wanted to call that out as well, because you'll see on the next slide, there is a section for CCA autonomy, and just wanted to highlight that was something that we worked on in that category. So please continue. Thanks. We'll move to accelerating decarbonization, which is the next sort of section of bills within our LEDGE program. AB 839, a bill that Ava supported and went signed into law, so we're pleased with this. Requires cities to adopt climate action plans by the end of the decade. We identified this as a worthwhile goal for decarbonization, sustainability at the local level. Ava cities generally have already done this or are in the process of doing so. So we're very happy to see this signed into law, and I think it'll go a long way to pushing local governments to take charge of that. Yes.
I'm a teacher, so.
Please, yeah.
No. And anyway, Livermore already has a climate action plan. How do we sit with other cities? Are they behind, or are they moving forward in California, or what?
Are you talking about like Ava City, or is there just other cities in California?
Cities in
general?
California, because that's a California bill, right? Not
Yes,
Ava.
yeah, it's statewide. I'm not sure like the specific number of cities that have adopted them or not. I don't know if Todd or Sam knows any specifics on that.
In Ava territory, I believe Stockton is the only city we have that hasn't already developed a plan. So I believe the rest of the cities in our jurisdiction have one already developed. So
Sam's got his hand up.
Yeah.
actually, yeah, let's see.
I was thinking about, for example, the Tri-Valley area, cause I talk to a lot of people there, so they're starting to know who I am, so I can bug them about things like this.
I think the vast majority of our members have developed
Yeah.
them. That's not to say that they can't be furthered or improved depending on how some of the standards are being developed via the bill. Across the state of California, there's more variability there for sure.
I was thinking about, how would I be able to find out, like, does Dublin have one?
I think it's an individualized posting
Like a
process for the
column up?
cities. I don't think that's like a centralized, there's some regulatory body that aggregates all of the sustainability plans. So yeah, unfortunately, it's city by city. You have to go to their website. Chances are maybe posted publicly. And if not, you'd have to reach out. We certainly have access to a number of the cities that have that. Very collaborative in that regard. But certainly across the state, it, of course, it's a very ad hoc process.
Okay.
Sam, did
Sam?
you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. That all of our municipalities and communities have them. I'm sorry, one. Sorry about that. I would note that all of our communities and municipalities do have them in place with the exception of San Joaquin County and the city of Stockton. However, I will note that there are requirements in the bill that all of the municipalities will need to have addressed by 2030. So there will be a process under which those will have to be looked at for what they are today to make sure they are in compliance with the law as written. So there will be a process I mentioned for everyone to ensure either make more robust or ensure compliance with the bill moving forward.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. So we'll keep moving. We'll go to AB 306, which I won't go into too much detail because I believe that many of you are familiar generally with this moratorium on local codes to building standards. It's something I believe has been brought to this committee before, but just mentioning this was a bill that we were monitoring. The language from AB 306 was adopted into a budget trailer bill that was signed into law by the governor this summer, earlier this year. The moratorium has already began going into effect on October 1st, so earlier this month. But it does have some general exemptions for code changes that have to do with health and safety, home hardening, for example. So just wanted to note that as well. That was something that we are tracking. And I'll move down here to SB 283, which is another bill that Ava took originally a supportive amended position on, but we moved to a support position because, as again Todd mentioned earlier in the presentation, we were able to get the changes, the amendments that we asked the author for successfully implemented into the bill. I'll just name those. So one, this was to ensure that the requirements wouldn't apply retroactively to battery storage projects already in operation or under construction. And two, just to clarify that the definition of battery storage system in the bill would only apply to utility scale battery projects, not small behind the meter customer sided batteries. And just in general, SB 283 requires or creates new safety and inspection requirements for battery storage developments, again, on a utility scale. So again, successful, we're able to get some amendments into that bill and make it better and ultimately cross the finish line and was signed into law by the governor. Great, we'll move to the next slide. And finally, just on the decarbonization section here, quickly wanted to go to a couple other bills that Ava supported, but did not become law this session. One was vetoed, one did not pass the legislature, so could be re-upped for next year. We'll start with AB 915, originally a clean energy infrastructure siting and funding bill. It was later amended into a completely different bill that has to do with dam safety, but just want to note here that some elements of this bill were adopted and incorporated into SB 254, that larger affordability package that was signed into law. And also SB 698 from Senator McNerney, this would have authorized the CEC to establish a list of approved distributed energy resource equipment on its website, like it does currently for solar equipment. Still did not pass the legislature. It could be revived for next session, and it's something that if it is reintroduced or revived, then we'll continue to support it. So that's all I have, and I'll pass it over to my colleague Kendall. Continue.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dominic. Kendall Downey, introducing myself, Public Policy Coordinator, also with our Public Policy team. So moving our presentation along, we have promoting local development, specifically as it relates to vehicle charging. So to briefly set the stage, we've seen a lot of EV adoption expanding across the state, and the push for access to reliable and dependable charging has understandably become critical to ensuring not only consumer confidence, but needed investment in the transition away from gas-powered vehicles. To address these concerns, Assemblymember Irwin introduced 1423, as we see on the presentation, a bill originally intended to codify already developing CEC charging uptime regulations, which was then largely amended and narrowed to merely define EV charging payment methods. As we can see, 1423 was then signed into law in its largely amended form. On the other hand, we see SB 314, a bill that we opted to support. This bill would allow for a charging station that is currently undergoing state inspection to operate during that period of inspection. As this process we've seen is often delayed by 6 months or longer, we supported an effort to bring charging online at a faster rate. If there's no questions, we can keep moving on. Oh, sorry, did you have a question?
I'll think of one,
Oh,
but not yet.
no worries. So as we move on to promoting local development, again, as this specifically relates to data centers, again, to set a little bit of context, under the CEC's planning scenario, PG&E is currently forecast to see roughly 5.5 gigawatts of new data center demand over the next decade. A critical concern for all stakeholders remain how we manage these large loads coming online in a way that, one, protects California's climate goals, and two, prevents ratepayers from being saddled with stranded costs. Legislators introduced a slate of data center and large load bills. Most notably here, we have SB 57 and AB 222 to begin addressing concerns and questions as these new loads come online. SB 57 was originally drafted to create an entirely separate tariff for large loads in order to prevent customers not participating in that tariff from bearing those cost shifts, but was largely amended and watered down to simply authorize the commission to evaluate potential cost shifts. As we can see, SB 57 was signed into law in that watered down form as well. AB 222, as mentioned earlier in our presentation, likewise was drafted with the intent to track large load costs and prevent shifts, but was amended to more narrowly target data centers and require that they report their power usage effectiveness, essentially their energy efficiency, to the CEC, directing the CEC's IPER, and then finally tasking the PUC with evaluating whether those data center loads are shifting costs onto non-benefiting ratepayers. We're going to flag that we can expect RBK to reintroduce similar legislation next session. If we don't have any questions on that, I'll go ahead and move into our increasing bill transparency and understanding, specifically dynamic rates. So as you've heard this conversation again and again, energy affordability continued to be a pressing concern for legislators going into this 2025 session. The potential to shift load away from peak times became of key interest to a number of legislators. So to set the stage a little bit for dynamic rates before I discuss specifically AB 44 on our slides and SB 541 directly, AVA customers are currently allowed to participate in dynamic rate pilots through the existing CPUC demand flexibility proceeding. However, the results of those pilots will not be available until 2028. LSEs, like AVA, are also required to provide dynamic rates by 2027, as directed by the CEC's load management standards. We've been working closely with the CEC as they develop these load management standards, advocating for reforms and needed improvements. Onto the actual bills that were introduced, we went ahead and took a support position on AB 44, as it allows LSEs to receive credit for the load shifting that they can prove they have completed, a concept we heavily support. SB 541, on the other hand, was introduced as a de facto load shifting mandate, but we saw a chance to work with an energy leader to remove aspects of the bill we didn't support while also integrating via our written amendments a key missing operational piece, which would direct how the bill would actually be implemented should it go into effect. As mentioned earlier, this bill, once was out of our hands, we saw the amendments removed and the mandate remained, hence we did not move to a support position. That was a lot of information, and I wanted to clarify, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan is a member of our delegation, as noted earlier, so if RBK for AB 222 introduces that language, we'll be sure to work with her closely again.
I have a question on,
Yeah.
and thank you for the presentation. On AB 44, I was going to read the veto message. It's been flagged to me as notable, but given that something like AB 44, and for that matter, almost every single bill this cycle dealing with dynamic rates, load shifting, or distributed energy resources that made it to the governor was vetoed. What would you say might be the landscape that we might expect in the coming legislative year?
I'll take that one. This actually gets to the last slide that we were going to present.
Okay.
And
I,
yeah.
I will not steal your thunder.
Well, I don't mind previewing it. There were several veto messages which boiled down to the governor saying the agencies have this, get out of their turf. AB 44 would be one of those where the veto message was that counting load mod for RA is inconsistent with the PUC's framework for resource adequacy. And we saw that as well. I think 1423, similar veto message. CEC's got it. We don't need legislation and vetoing it. So it does raise a question of how much this governor is willing to tolerate the legislature stepping into realms that the regulatory agencies are covering.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. To move things along, we're going to move along to bills concerning IOUs. If you don't mind talking the next slide. Lovely. Thank you so much. So once again, as we've reiterated throughout this session, California energy bills have increased significantly, and legislators tasked themselves in response to growing ratepayer pressure with targeting IOU expenditures as another attempt to bring ratepayer relief. Historically, AVA has not taken position on bills that directly relate to IOUs, as these are not considered technically in our wheelhouse. The bills we tracked this session largely reviewed IOU political spending and evaluated the profit structure of an IOU. Notably, we saw AB 1167 passed and signed into law. SB 24 and 1167 reflected twin efforts from each side of the legislature. However, 1167 reflected broader, more flexible changes. AB 1167's more detailed treatment and more granular reporting may be viewed as a bit more workable and politically feasible than SB 24's harsher constraints, hence the veto message for SB 24 and passage of 1167. The governor also might have favored one to encourage policy alignment between AB 1167 and SB 24, potentially the preferred vehicle here. We can continue moving along if we don't have any more questions on that slide. So going on to maybe the most related to AVA itself, we have our board operations and specifically modernizing the Brown Act. So as previous legislation during enabling several of the COVID era Brown Act remote participation provisions were timing out, we saw a large push this session to overhaul and modernize the Brown Act. AB 259 and SB 239, introduced by Senator Arreguín, a member of our delegation and a previous board member, were both intended to support local agencies facing the gap between what is administratively sustainable and politically acceptable for public meetings. Both bills were taken up later in session by a larger legislative vehicle, SB 707, as we can see on this slide, which was later signed into law, referred to by the author as the bill that would, quote, bring the Brown Act into the 21st century, which effectively adopted many of the COVID era changes to open meeting rules. AVA, along with a large coalition, worked to move this bill along, and we're really excited to see it signed into law. Our legal team is currently working and undergoing a deeper analysis of how what the operational impacts of this bill will be to our board and potentially other subsidiary bodies, but we'll be sure to keep you updated on any further details.
All right, let's hand the mic back to Dominic here.
Yeah, I got one more slide here. So I'll round out the bill review portion of this presentation with a couple highlights from this slide. We'll start up top with AB 13. This is a bill that AVA was monitoring. It originally would have required geographic representation of CPUC commissioners. It didn't pass, and we saw a general stance, I think, as mentioned by Todd, that from the governor's office this session that generally opposed legislative changes to or new requirements being imposed on the agencies like the PUC, CEC. So imagine that might have been the reason why this didn't move forward, but just wanted to highlight that specifically. AB 942, this was a NEM reform bill. It originally would have ended NEM 1.0 and 2.0 contracts after 10 years, but it was later gutted and amended and changed to a climate credit bill that ultimately did not move forward. I imagine it was scrapped because of significant opposition from homeowners in the solar industry in general. But just noting that was something that we were monitoring, but ultimately did not move forward from the legislature. And the final one I'll highlight here, SB 453. This language in this bill would have originally extended the self-generation incentive program, SGIP, through the end of 2027. So it extended it another couple of years. which is why Ava originally took a support position on this bill, but that language, the extending the program, was removed from the bill, I think over the summer, so earlier this year. So we moved to more of a monitor position on it. Ultimately, it did not pass the legislature. So just wanted to note that as well. And I'll pass it back to Todd for the remainder of our presentation.
All right, thank you. So analogous slide to the one that we showed at the start of the presentation, this one for 26 instead of for 25. One thing I would flag for you is that because of the election in November, midterm elections in November of 26, the legislative calendar has been pulled forward a month versus what we saw last year. So just for your awareness, we'll be moving on a somewhat earlier timeline than we did in 2025. Next slide. All right, so harking back to your question of a moment ago, what did we learn in 2025 that we can take into 2026? And the very first bullet there is the one that we were talking about. The governor is very protective of, put this in quotes, his agencies, particularly the PC and the CEC. And so laws that are getting into matters that are before those agencies or that the agencies have decided are veto bait, potentially. So that's something that we'll have to bear in mind going forward very clearly. Next learning there is that the IOUs, the investor-owned utilities, PG&E, Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric Company, are very leery of legislation that affects the transmission and distribution system, the T&D system. That is where they make their money. And so we bumped into that dynamic in the context of SB 541, where we had been working closely with the author's office to get some language in there that was going to impact really the distribution system going forward and how it interacted with distributed resources, and the utilities pushed back hard on that, ultimately removing our language, as Dominic mentioned, and reinserting new language, or reinserting old language and inserting new language. And of course, ultimately that bill was vetoed. Finally, the last couple of bullets there, Kendall talked about data centers. That is a huge issue for the energy industry going forward. And so the bills that we saw this session are probably just the leading edge of a much larger universe of bills dealing with data centers that we expect to see going forward. And then finally, just flagging that CCAs have seen their stature in the legislature increase. CCAs are now a majority of the load in California, now serve a majority of the load in PG&E service territory, almost all of the load in San Diego Gas and Electric Company's service territory, and a still increasing portion of Southern California Edison's loads. So this has changed the dynamics in Sacramento in 25, expected to continue to shift things in 26 as we move forward. All right, so substantively, what can we expect to see in 2026? We touched on a couple of these with the 25 learnings. There are some issues that were not resolved in 25 that are going to come forward. RA transactability, we see there. This is resource adequacy. Right now, under the administrative framework, there's no ability to trade resource adequacy obligations. And so that's been an issue that CalCCA has raised with the legislature, did not get across the line this year. We expect to see it again next year. Data centers, we just talked about. Energy efficiency program oversight. Dominic touched on that and our success in keeping our programs versus having them subject to state level oversight. But we fully anticipate that we will see further efforts to rein in spending on energy efficiency programs in the legislature next year. Similarly, dynamic rates or load modification is noted. There were a couple of bills on those issues last year. 740, I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier when I said 1423 was vetoed. It was 740 that was vetoed on the grounds that, hey, the agencies have this. We again expect to see the legislature take a run at these issues, notwithstanding the veto. Against the backdrop of recurring issues, there are new issues that we expect to see coming up next year. Obviously, the big one is going to be what to do about the federal changes that have been coming our way over the past several months, and particularly funding gaps. And then there will be a question about what to do with funding gaps created by the changes in the rules for how the cap and trade money is passed around. And we flagged a couple of potential DSGS, the demand side grid services program that the California Energy Commission runs is one that has been funded by GGRF money, may not be going forward. Where is the money for that going to come from? If not, what happens to the program? And then finally, the broader question of structural budget deficits for the state as a whole. What will the effects of that be on spending on energy programs? So flagging all of those for you, expect to hear more on those as the session kicks off early next year. Finally, what might the CCA folks be putting forward? Flag their possibility of some transmission and distribution legislation, perhaps taking another run at the changes that we were seeking to get through 541, and also PCIA reform. I won't belabor that one. You are all familiar with the power charge indifference adjustment from our budget conversations. It may take legislative fixes to address some of the recurring problems that we have seen there, which will go through a regulatory process, but where we may not see the changes that we were hoping for. And then finally, there's likely to be some shifting around of the personalities in the Senate committees in particular, so stay tuned on. All right, I think that concludes our presentation for this morning. So with that, I guess we'll see if there were any other questions that folks had. Hand it back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much. See, before we go to questions, I just wanted to see if there are any public comments on this item, members of the public.
Yes, Jim Lutz, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Jim Lutz, I'm a member of the CAC, but speaking for myself right now. And it sounds like the discussion is going to go into the place where my first question is, which was, what efforts is AVA going to be taking to foster the policy changes and legislative changes that it would like, and what effort internally is going on and with the board members to figure out what topics and what areas and what language AVA would like to see. So that's one general question. And a very narrow question is, why doesn't the California legislature ever override the governor like happens in other states fairly regularly? So that's just a question I'm curious about. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. There are any other?
There are no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna go back to questions in the room, and then we'll go to questions online from board members. Do you have any questions in the room? Yes.
Just clarification, so when you talk about data centers, you're talking about AIs and all that?
Yes.
The
Each,
other thing is, I was reading somewhere, maybe it's garbage, but Musk going to some state and promising that he's going to use so much power, and then when they start checking it out, he's like tripled it. And it flew in the air, mainly it's for his AI thingy. And my question is, how can we protect ourselves from these guys sucking up all the energy and then driving up the cost?
well, so the Musk situation that you're talking about, I believe refers to a data center he set up in Memphis. And there they ended up installing double the natural gas fired capacity that they were permitted to install.
Yeah,
So-
more than double, from 15 to 35.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the short answer to that question is if you want to stop that kind of thing, you enforce your permitting laws. Or you don't permit emitting resources in the first instance.
And one more question, when we're putting batteries, where we're putting them in, my son works for Kutin Electric and they put in 450 over in Tracy. And he goes, they're moving along, and they take him jobs where he comes in under budget and under, the time. And the only thing that screws them up is fire marshal coming in at the last minute saying, well, you didn't do this, and it was not even in the plan that you would do it. And he has to go back and dig things up again and put it in what the fire marshal does. So my question is, how can we get these fire marshals up to snuff where they do the job on time and not so the installation of some of these batteries?
Yeah, that one I don't have an answer for.
I
Oh,
have
you
one
should.
just on SB 283, so the bill that we highlighted that Ava supported this year. The sort of driving force behind that bill was to get developers in with the fire marshals and other local fire officials before those projects are developed, to make sure that they're on the same page about safety, about the requirements in the local area, to ensure, one, just for safety in general, but also to make sure that those sort of issues don't come up. SB 283 is the bill. It was passed, it was signed into law by the governor.
And I'll just say in general, with fire code, historically, fire code is something that's managed with individual jurisdictions. So fire departments within counties specifically setting some of those standards. For batteries specifically, due to some of the risks that we've seen recently, the large Moss Landing fire, there's been more and more standardization around what are best practices for fire codes, fire prevention, fire response plans that have been set by NFPA. So there's international and national standards there. So putting aside the policy that may legislate a requirement that standardizes things, I think the individual jurisdictions are getting up to speed through some of these national standards are happening anyways. And so I think the question is, is there a requirement, a need, is there a benefit for some level of state legislation that would mandate some, one of these standards and levels to be uniform across the board? And so that's what some of the efforts are to do. And I'll just say that aside of those efforts, there is a lot of work that's already being done to standardize that. Because I think that big issue with Moss Landing certainly was one thing that spurred a lot of response from individual counties evaluating that. Fortunately, a lot of that work was actually done years prior to it, so there were already new standards that were put in place across the different counties, looking at NFPA and some of the updated codes that are continuing to improve some of those best practices and procedures. And but an event like that obviously spurs greater attention to it and a lot of work there.
Well, I appreciate your presentation. I'll just throw it on the pile with the stop waste legislation after I get overwhelmed with all these. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. I have some questions, but at first I actually wanted to go to my colleague online, Board Member Lopez. Do you have any questions?
No questions at the time, but thank you for very clear and concise presentation on updates around how things are moving at the state level.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have just a couple of questions. I really appreciate the presentation as well. On SB 453, I just couldn't remember what was the SCHIP language that was removed from the bill?
It was an extension of the program, I believe.
Right.
Go ahead.
No worries at all. So as we originally had interpreted the bill, it was a bit more general, it's amended to then include, it was more focused on a microgrid incentive program. So different bucket of funding essentially that it was going to extend. So it actively wasn't going to extend any SCHIP funding that we would have access to. And that, therefore we moved from the bill. But originally in the format it was in, we had assumed that it would also extend SCHIP funding or was an attempt to do so. Author clarified that it was a microgrid incentive program extension only.
Did that have to do with just the ability for dual participation in SCHIP and another programs such as through CCA, or was it different?
I think it was different in terms of this author's focus was on the microgrid incentive program, not on SCHIP specifically, nor the dual participation between CCAs and IOU customers.
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you. On AB 942, minor point, but I just wanted to clarify, and I think when you spoke through what this bill would have done, I think it started out as that 10-year, then it became home sales would kick you off the NEM 1 or NEM 2 legacy tariff. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, it did go through a couple different versions of amendments. I think I just wanted to touch on that, what the original version of the bill would have done. But yeah, I think you're correct on that, yes.
Yeah, and then and this is just because I was following this
Sure.
bill in particular. I actually, my understanding was it made it through approach in the second house once it was modified, but to be honest, I haven't tracked it since then, so I was curious as to the status, but I can find that out online.
Yeah, and I can double check that too. I know it did stall in the Senate. I think what we noted was in the policy committee. So typically it's before probes, but we can double check.
It was
that as
gutted.
well.
It was
Yeah.
completely gutted in
Yeah.
in the Senate Policy Committee. Became just the climate
yeah.
credit. But I think it well, and at that point, a lot of the opposition moved off
Sure.
propose
Yeah.
and remained neutral. Anyway, my
Got it.
minor point,
Sure.
not directly related to this. Okay. We are in comments. I wanted to see if, are there any comments online from board members? Hearing none. Comments in the room, board member, Parientos, do you have anything else on this item?
Yeah, I do. One thing, for marketing, that's where we are, right? And I was trying to figure out how can we do more marketing and a little more, because we had a festival. I passed out as many flyers as I can about Ava. It felt like a drop in the bucket as far as most people. I don't care what we do. Like we have websites, and we're doing a big development in my area, and people come up to me, "What's the deal?" We had 3 town halls. It's on the website. I pull the website out for the look. They still don't get the message, so I'm trying to figure out how you do a better job of marketing what Ava does, and like the 2 projects we got going, and the 3 that we didn't get going, and the people who know really appreciate that, and it's kind of exciting to have you guys come and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, this is the Marketing Regulatory Legislative Subcommittee, so we spent a good chunk of time today talking about really the policy aspects, and of course, the other piece of the focus of the subcommittee is on marketing, and that's full acknowledgement that I think it is challenging to engage and educate our customers broadly about who AVA is and electricity matters. I think it's something that is generally taken for granted and not an area of attention or interest for the vast majority of your everyday customers. This group aside, of course, who are energy wonks and advocates and have a high degree of interest. So I think we're always thinking about ways to engage further with customers to help educate them, inform them of who AVA is, and how to engage more with electricity. Whether they be programs, whether it be about selecting your wholesale energy products, and some of the different services and projects that we're working on, specifically in their city, but also more broadly in the county and the state of California. So we're always trying to find ways to do that. Always welcome that from our board members, from city council, from Stopways, who we work with and partner with. And there's more to be done there. We're a 7-year-old agency that has our services, our primary services, wrapped under the bill of PG&E, and so that hinders some of that ability. But I think we're not to mention the fact that, of course, we've rebranded to a new name over the last several years. So there's more work for us to be done. With that said, I think we've done a lot of things in terms of the different events that we attend. We try to do that throughout the territory, and we're always looking for new ways to kind of market and communicate with our customers. So one of the things that I just talked to the marketing team about the other day is further developing our brand strategy, and that brand strategy is a multi-year 3 to 5 to 10-year brand strategy, because that's what it takes to really raise awareness for an agency like ours and to find ways to engage. And I think now, as we're, the last year and going forward, we're going to be doing a lot more programs that I think customers want to engage with directly, whether it be a managed charging program because they are using their EVs, or whether it is a solar and storage incentive program that gives them dollars to go install behind the meter storage at their homes. Whether it's the e-bike lending incentive program where they can directly deploy some of those dollars in a meaningful way. So I think we're in a good position to offer some of the products and services that will actually get our customers more engaged directly and excited. Whereas, wholesale electricity on your bill is probably a less effective way to sort of have that engagement.
Well, one thing that Ava had that you gave me for our table, a homeless guy got it, so he's running around town with the Ava thing, so.
Oh,
Publicizing Ava.
We're always looking for ways to get our name ran out there, whatever means that is.
fortunately, it's not a ratepayer.
That we know of. Well, thank you so much for the comprehensive presentation, and thank you for your advocacy in the Capitol. It has been, it has not gone unnoticed, and I appreciate your highlighting the legislative wins that we were able collectively as both AVA and or Cal CCA to achieve. That is really a testament to the hard work of staff, and so I want to just recognize that. This is maybe a bit of that was a great rhetorical question from a member of the public. Why does the state legislature never override a veto? That was a great question that was asked many times with other bills that were vetoed following opposition by investor-owned utilities. And so just to set the this has been a very challenging time in the legislature in general. Where there is nearly unchecked power, it appears, by the investor-owned utility monopoly. And given that landscape, I think it makes the wins that we were able to secure this year all the more remarkable. I will, in terms of the look ahead, I'm very interested in this push to maybe look at what we can do around alternatives to IOUs having sole proprietorship on building out more transmission and distribution. And I recognize there is a bit of a philosophical debate in the Capitol right now, although I will say that I think hearts and minds are changing when in the Capitol when they look at the data. But are things like distributed energy resources, load shifting, demand response, I think increasingly they're being seen, notwithstanding some opposition from powerful interests, as a net positive, as a benefit that will actually drive affordability and not do the opposite. And in that sense, that those are all great alternatives to the traditional 20th century model, which is how PG&E and the other utilities and Western utilities make their money. To staff's point, so I'm very interested in what this T&D push might look like, as well as responding to federal changes. Like just I've been following a little bit discussion. Well, now NEM credits have just been reduced. Community solar has pretty much, well, it's non-existent due to some challenging decisions by the Public Utilities Commission. So what now, in the absence of with now the feds tamping down on investment tax credits and pulling back any remaining funding for community solar, So I would be interested in, within CCAs in particular, how we might be able to leverage the message of certain decisions may have been made by agencies when there was still federal funding available or incentives available. Now there isn't. And perhaps that might be an opening for us to be able to just continue to change more hearts and minds within Sacramento. And with the, I think the last issue I want to mention is just I am very concerned about the just DSGS, that program not having any future year sources of funding right now. I would love to see that change. The only program that was saved in this budget was DIBA, the Distributed Energy Backup Assets Program. It is a challenging budget with structural deficits faced by the state, and I don't want to minimize that at all. And again, it is my personal belief, which I think is broadly shared within this agency, that these kinds like distributed generation, community resiliency, all of these things are net benefits, not net costs, which actually save ratepayer money. And I am interested in what we can do to continue to push back on any message not based in fact that it is anything other than that. So with that, I just want to thank staff again. Do you have any final comments you would like to make on this?
Nothing from us. Thank you.
Great. Well, we are moving off of that item, and we are on item 5, committee member and staff announcements. This includes requests to place items on future board agendas, if there are any such requests. The next meeting of this committee would be December 19th.
Same time, same place?
Same place.
At the same time.
I could maybe ask staff, are there any items that you are right now anticipating bringing to us in December?
Not right now. As I mentioned at the outset, we anticipate bringing this deck, subject to any input that the subcommittee provides, in November. But we did not anticipate bringing anything in December.
Yeah, just
Mark,
to
you-
confirm that question. So 2 months from now, roughly, that Friday, 10 a.m., same time, same place. We do not have preliminary topics to present right now, but typically over the next month, we would start to generate upcoming agenda items, and obviously engaging with the rest of the committee to determine if there's anything of interest. Understanding it's right ahead of the holiday, there's certainly a potential that we will cancel that meeting. And so to the extent there is nothing urgent, we may seek to do that. So we'll try to do that ahead of time so that people can be aware of that planning.
Yeah, if that makes sense to me. If we were to meet in December, I would be interested in just, I mean, now through basically January is the time, of course, to talk to legislators about potential new legislative topics and bills. And if there's anything that is not so pre-decisional as to be able to be shared in committee, that would be, one topic of interest for me.
So what's going on in November? Nothing?
Nothing. So this subcommittee typically meets every other month.
Oh, no, nothing in November.
For MRL, nothing in November, correct?
Okay.
For the board, this deck, for the full board.
Well, thank you. Seeing no other items, we're going to adjourn at 11:18. Do we need a vote to adjourn?
No.
We can just adjourn.
Thanks all.